Welcome to Hardfire. I'm Ronald WIECK, your host for part 2 of the 3-part debate on the collapses of the Twin Towers. Our guests are from the last segment, Tony SZAMBOTI, a mechanical engineer here in the studio with me today, and Ryan MACKEY, a NASA rocket scientist on webcam from California. We're going to try to pick up where we left off at the end of the first round. We were discussing the collapses and the energy that was available to cause the global collapse described by NIST in its comprehensive report and by Zdeněk Bezant in his paper. I think I want to begin with Ryan. We do want to clarify this issue of energy sinks, how much energy was available and how much was dissipated, and for what reason was the energy dissipated?
Yeah, this is getting a little bit afield. In the white paper that I wrote discussing David Ray Griffin, I worked out in one of the appendices an estimate of the total energy available. And I expressed this in terms of its explosive equivalent, partly because the truth movement seems interested in theories involving explosives. The amount of energy available per tower was on the order of 100 tons of TNT. Now that's just gravitational energy. That's just what it took to lift it to that height. The number is that large because, obviously they were very large structures, but also because they're very high. If you had the same building laying on its side, that amount of gravitational potential would have been much lower. Now, from the estimated time of collapse of the Twin Towers, we work out that maybe 40 or 50% of that energy was dissipated during the collapse. The rest of that energy is still available to break things once they hit the ground. But this means the lower structure resisted with the equivalent energy absorption of about 40 tons of TNT. Now, immediately that should make you question these explosive theories, because if it can absorb that much, and you need to account for more energy than that, we're not talking about a small amount of explosives here. We're talking about truckloads. We're talking about B-52 loads of explosives. If you're dealing with a small amount of explosives, you're not going to have that much effect on the collapse time. So that's where we come down on that. We need to see a really good theory as to how this was accomplished before we'll believe it, because those numbers are just so incredible.
Well, Tony, let's move to you. If we're positing explosives as an explanation, how much are we talking about, and how did it get in there?
First of all, what you have to understand is 100% of the gravitational potential energy is held by the building with significant reserve. The building can hold a lot more than that, and there's factors of safety designed in. So it doesn't crumble when you initially build it. In Ryan's white paper, he does a calculation, and just as an example, where if the building fell at 1.7 meters per second acceleration per second squared versus 9.8, which is that due to gravity, that you could show that 81% of the potential energy of the upper block was used to destroy the building. The reality is, if it sounds impressive, until you realize that 81%, it was holding up with it could hold up three times 100% or 300%.
Wait. I need to correct you on two different things. First of all, in my calculation, I'm not talking about the potential energy in the upper block. I'm talking about for the entire structure. Because as it breaks, you're adding mass, new things are falling, you're liberating all the energy of the entire structure, not just the upper mass.
But it's
the other thing is you're inflating energy and force, and you really can't do that. The strength of the building, yes, it did have some reserve, but that really doesn't say anything about the energy calculation.
Well, the energy to break it, Ryan, has to be greater than potential, not the energy, the force applied has to be greater than static force. It comes back to whether you have this amplified load and whether you have an impulse and a deceleration and you lose velocity. The upper block never loses velocity. It continually accelerates all the way through that building, which means it's not giving up its energy to destroy the lower block.
No, that's not true. Most of the reason the energy is being given up, again, is because of inelastic collision. It's not the fact that the building's strength is resisting. It's the fact that the building's mass is resisting. This descending chunk and all the rubble are hitting parts and accelerating them to their speed. That's where most of the energy transfers.
There's two different things there. One is conservation of momentum, and the other one is the force amplification you need to break things apart. So
If you want to go to the slides, I can demonstrate that there's no need for force sampling.
Before you show your slides, I want to ask both of you to address a rather simple, unsophisticated question. Ryan can go first. When the floors, including and above the impact zone, fail, when the perimeter columns, we see them buckling on the videos, when the floor trusses give way, when this whole upper block starts to descend, it hits the floor immediately below. What happens? What happens now?
Yeah, it's a little complicated because, again, the upper block is coming down at an angle. But what's going to happen immediately is you're going to get the floors, the next lower floors are damaged. They're the first things that come in contact. They're going to bend a little bit, and then they're going to tear free of their moorings, which is going to release the perimeter columns to fall away. Once the collapse really starts moving, however, there isn't even time for those lower floors to flex. They're just going to get smashed right off, taking their seats with them. And we know this is true because we've analyzed the rubble, and we find that above the point of collapse, the perimeter seats that the floors were sitting on failed in one way. Below the zone of impact where the upper block is hitting it, they're all bent, they're all smashed off, they're all damaged. So we have evidence for this.
Now, Tony, same question. Angus Bjorkman thinks that this upper block hits the floor beneath it, and it delivers a gentle kiss, and somehow friction causes everything to grind to a halt, and the top floors just float in midair.
He actually believes there should be an impulse and a jolt also.
But he's stating something that's mad. In other words, it's indefensible.
Well, I don't know if it's totally indefensible. I'm not going to go along with the 2-mile-high drop. Of course not. But what he says in general, he says anytime there's a collision, you're going to have deceleration. The impacting object has to decelerate in order to get an amplified load. And
he talks about two ships colliding.
Yeah, he does. Well, ship collisions he's involved in shipbuilding.
But there's no gravity involved in a ship
collision. That's true, but there's propulsion. Whatever's driving it, gravity is a different situation. In the sense that gravity is driving the descending block, if you will. What he tries to say is that, and I said this earlier, I guess in the last show, he says that the upper block would be destroyed itself as it's destroying the lower block. And by the time, if it's 12 stories high, by the time it got through 12 to 15 stories, maybe even 20 or 30 stories of the lower block, it in itself would be reduced to rubble, and that the rubble does not have the import. It doesn't participate. It's not a solid object. It comes back to the loose 2x4s or the loose sand hitting the building that can take many hit from a lesser force, but it can't take one large hit. It's sort of like if I have something that will fail at 10 pounds, a beam, if I put 10 pounds on it, and I put a lot of 1 pound items on it at different times, it can take those loads. If I put 20 pounds on it once, it's going to fail.
Ryan, we have to stop at this point. We really have to clarify this. If this upper block is damaged, reduced to rubble, what does that have to do with its capability for destroying the rest of the structure?
It makes very little difference.
Okay.
And the reason is, again, Tony in the past has run a calculation on what those floors could handle. Once you accept that the mass, when it's rubbleized, there's no way it's going to be resting on the column. It's just going to fall away from them. Those floors can only handle about 29 million pounds. That's it.
Well, wait a minute. That's the actual concrete slab. That's just the slab we're talking about. The columns can handle a lot more than 29 million pounds.
But if you're dealing with rubble, it's not going to land on the column.
Well, yeah, but how do you collapse the core columns?
I'm not quite done yet. And the amount of rubble we're talking about is much more than 29 million pounds. It's up to about 68 million pounds.
Yeah, but we're talking.
There's nothing that's going to stop it.
That's the floors. How do you tear out the core columns? And how about what I'm basically concerned with?
What holds the core columns up once the floors have disappeared?
Core columns don't need the floors to hold them up.
You're assuming the upper block stays intact. You're assuming the upper block comes in contact with the lower block column on column. Those are not acceptable.
Well, none of these things, Ryan, are what NIST said. NIST tries to say, you know.
I thought you said NIST didn't treat the collapse.
NIST doesn't, no, they just depend on Bazan.
Anything of the kind. NIST doesn't agree with you or me. They don't treat it. They're only looking up to initiation.
Right.
Now, Dr. Bazan does say that, but he also says This is the limiting case. This is the most favorable scenario to resist collapse.
Well,
We're dealing with the most favorable scenario. We're dealing with the real scenario.
no, I'm not. I'm not. The reality is that the core columns collapsed, and there is no deceleration of this building. We measured it through 9 floors. It just continues, and you're trying to say everything misses and goes on the floors, and I don't believe that. And the video evidence does not show a tilt right away. It shows a tilt after a 3 or 4 story drop. And the building's
I'll
got.
give you the floor for a minute. It might help if you clarified exactly what you think did happen. I'll be quiet.
Okay, yeah, all right, I hear. I think that there was strength removed from the columns, at least on the first several floors, and this thing started to move. It would sort of be like if I had a 100-pound plate right here and I put 30 columns under it that could each take 10 pounds of force. The upper block of the North Tower moved, accelerated at 70% of the rate of gravity. Now with this 100-pound plate, with the 30 10-pound force columns, you can see it has a factor of safety of 3 times. They could handle 300 pounds.
But didn't the planes break some of those columns?
Not at the floor where the initiation started.
Really?
The 98th floor had almost no damage. None.
Now, Tony, in the past, you've said that you believe there were explosives set off all the way up and down the tower at every 3 floors.
Well, let's deal with the first 3 floors, Ryan, and then we can get into something there. I'd say I believe it could happen either way. But I believe certainly the first several floors something had to be removing the strength of those columns in order for there not to be any deceleration of that upper block. And let me just make this example for people who aren't real familiar. If I have this 100-pound plate with the 30 columns under it that can take 10 pounds apiece, and I take away 27 of them and there's 3 left, that 100-pound plate is going to fall through those 3 10-pound columns at 70% of the rate of gravity. It's only going to experience a 30% resistance of 30% of the rate of gravity. That's sort of what happened with the towers. It's like 90% of the strength of the columns was just removed.
Let me read you back a quote. You once said, "What I believe, if somebody were to do this or plan a demolition starting at the aircraft impact, they would have to start demolishing the stories below and above simultaneously. It looks like you can see it more clearly in the North Tower collapse. The North Tower, the upper stories, the upper block almost telescopes in the bottom section being demolished itself." Do you still believe this?
Well, I believe that there was something going on in the initiation of those collapses. I certainly do, and I don't believe.
Well, wait a minute. You just said that if you're going to break up the upper block, you would have less of an impact on the lower structure. So wouldn't exploding the upper block be counterproductive to this collapse?
Well, I think the video shows that the upper block actually does break up, at least in the first few stories. What I'm saying I'm saying that the upper block, in order to make it occur, would have to impact it. I'm saying it didn't impact it. It fell through it as though only 10% of the column strength was there. And what really happened is the upper block started disintegrating the first 3 to 5 stories before the lower block even started to fall.
Well, why would they do that?
I don't know, Ryan. You'd have to ask them.
See, this is what troubles a lot of people. Now, I've spoken to a number of demolition experts. I've called several companies. We're going to scroll across your screen a shortened list of the companies that I've phoned. The full list appeared on one of the shows we did with Arthur Scheuerman, a retired battalion chief in the FDNY. My problem is this. Everyone who works in demolition says that these theories of explosives in the World Trade Center are nonsense. I mean, they're impossible. They reflect no understanding whatever of the realities of demolition.
They don't tell you what the realities are, do they? They just give you that assertion?
I had Stacy Loiseau explain to me over the course of an hour how you go about setting charges to bring down a normal-sized building. She points out no one has ever attempted to bring down a building the size of the World Trade Center. No one's ever attempted to bring down
What if they did do it?
They would certainly bring it down from the bottom.
Not necessarily.
Well, do you
I
think...
can break it. If I have a table, I can break this table at that corner or this corner.
You would plant charges on the exact floors that a commercial airliner is going to crash into?
No, if you heard me, the actual collapse initiation sites were just above where the major impact damage was.
But the fires would destroy the explosives.
Not necessarily. You could.
Well, you keep saying not necessarily.
No.
But demolition experts say that they would.
They do. Okay. You're telling me that it's absolutely impossible to armor.
No, I'm not a demolition expert.
Okay.
I'm asking you why.
Did they tell you couldn't possibly protect these charges from fire?
Did
they tell you that?
They said the notion of putting the amount of charges necessary to do what you claim into a building like this is absurd.
Well,
it couldn't be done.
That's incredible.
It's a logistical impossibility.
It is?
Because you would have to strip the walls, you would have to expose the columns, you would have to strip the...
So why is that impossible?
Because there are thousands of people working
Are
in
they
the
going there all night long?
Oh, come now.
What if people were in control of security?
Well,
you couldn't do that?
We
you
already
can't see a way that could happen?
Marvin Bush had nothing to do with security at the World Trade Center.
I didn't say Marvin Bush. And it doesn't have to be Marvin Bush.
According to Stacy Loiseau, teams of 75 to 100 men working for months to prep the World Trade Center.
I'd need to see the details of that, because
I
see a lot lower numbers, but that doesn't matter.
I don't wish to be unkind here, but this is a theory that you're promoting, and you've never picked up a phone to call any demolition company.
I read what some of these people have said.
But, I mean, what are the possibilities? Are they all in on it?
You're just incredulous that this could happen. That's not proof of anything.
But demolition experts are saying this is nonsense.
And now you're appealing to authority. He doesn't give you any details either, Ron.
I'm having real trouble hearing you guys. You're talking over each other.
All right.
Okay. Ryan, you might want to weigh in on this. I'm making the point
Let me try to calm it down a little bit. Let me ask Tony a real simple thought experiment. Okay. Suppose that I work for a demolition company, and I'm going to blow up a World Trade Center, and it's perfectly legal. They're going to let me do it. So let's say that I'm going to plant my charges at the initiation floor. So this is definitely a controlled demolition, this imaginary scenario. I'm going to plant my charges out at 498. I'm going to blow the core first, the perimeter, whatever. Would you expect to not see a jolt in that situation? Yes or no?
No, in that situation, if you just planted charges and you didn't plant charges further down, I would expect to see a jolt if you did it on one floor and you're using gravity right away.
But then why would I plant charges lower down? I can do the job by putting everything...
Not necessarily if you want reliability and you do overkill.
Reliability is a factor of do my charges go off or not. If I want reliability, I double the charges on 98.
No, not necessarily if you don't have the right amount of mass. And it goes back, I did think of an answer to your other question. When you asked why would they get rid of the first few floors of the upper block, they are trying to develop momentum of some sort, I believe, there. That's why in the case of Building 7 fell 8 stories unimpeded, pretty much. Everybody knows that it actually fell for 100 feet in free fall acceleration.
Well, we get back to the absence of any audio evidence of explosives.
Well that is a problem. I'm not arguing that, but there's
I mean, we've got
postulation and there's other ways that things can be done.
We have tons of explosives to get the upper block moving, and yet they produce no sound.
All right, the French vernage technique, where they use jacks, hydraulic jacks, to blow the columns, doesn't produce any sounds either.
Guys, before we lose my point, the point is, if I was a demolitioneer and if I was going to blow up those towers, there would be a jolt. I have to do something exceptional. I have to do something crazy
not
to prevent the jolt.
Not necessarily. You can't prevent the jolt if you keep blowing the floors.
Why would I blow up the entire structure top to bottom simultaneously? Why would I do that? That's not the way it's done.
What? You can do it. Are you saying it can't be done the way you see it done?
Tony, I'm having a little trouble understanding you. Are you saying that there are explosions going up all the way down?
I think, at least for the first 8 to 9 stories, that the column strength is being removed somehow. I didn't say explosives. And I just told you that the vernage technique, they use jacks to break the columns. There's a number of ways you can remove the strength of the columns. You can weaken joints. I don't know how that was done. I'm not saying it had to be explosive. I'm saying the column strength was removed, certainly for the 9 stories that we measured, 90% of the column strength for the 9 stories we measured the fall of this upper block. It was experiencing very little resistance coming down.
Ryan, my understanding of the vernage technique is that they use cables in sort of a crisscross fashion. Is this feasible?
There's a variety of ways.
Yeah, they can do it with cables, they can do it with hydraulics. Yeah, there's a number of ways you can do it, but we're talking about extremely large apparatus.
How could you do this in a building where thousands of people work? Wouldn't someone notice?
I don't think that's a good argument because some of the floors in the World Trade Center were closed down for reconfiguration.
But we can find out what was on the floors that you're alleging this
Things can be
this
done.
happened.
Things can be done at night.
You
There's a
really
lot of
think
people weren't in those
hydraulics?
How many people were in those buildings at night? I don't think there was many, was there?
Well, there are people in the buildings. There are people.
Well, somebody was in on it from security. Would they be able to do that?
So the next day, when the people go to work on the 98th floor, they don't hold this equipment in place.
Well, first of all, if you have a drop ceiling and things like that, you don't notice what's up and under the ceiling.
Again, the problem here is that you're just making things up.
No, I didn't. I'm postulating, just like detectives do.
Yeah.
When they see something that doesn't look right, they have to investigate. This doesn't look right. We don't have anything that really explains it. And there was motives.
But this is the problem. Demolition professionals say that it absolutely does not resemble a controlled demolition. And you're
They
saying...
say that about Building 7?
Yes, absolutely.
They do?
Yes.
Has everybody, I don't know if all your viewers have seen...
The only person who says
video of
anything to
Building 7.
Danny Joanko is the only person who has said
No.
anything to the contrary. Danny Joanko has never demolished a large building.
Right.
Ryan, am I off base here, or should we take into consideration the professional expertise of people who work in the demolition industry?
Well, you certainly can't just hand wave it away. I mean, I'm not a demolitioneer. I haven't talked.
But it is appeal to authority, Ryan. You have to agree with
But
that.
it's appeal to a legitimate authority. I mean,
There's
this
nothing
is...
wrong with that.
No, not without details, though. And there are Danny Joanko disagrees, then that means it is appeal to authority because there's dissension among those particular experts. As soon as that
I
happens...
agree with you. I think we should go with detail, but that's the detail I'm
Well-
waiting for from you guys. I need to understand.
Well, I think you're getting some of it. You probably need more, and...
Well, you've read Brent Blanchard's Protect paper?
Yeah, I don't agree with him, and I don't remember all the details. I've read his paper. I don't agree with much of what he says, and he's not a demolition expert himself. He writes for a magazine.
He is employed by
Protect-
demolition companies to record demolitions.
To write about it and record about it. He doesn't
Yeah.
have the expertise to do it. Basically, what his argument is, well, we didn't find any demolition charges in the rubble. Well, if I was a criminal going to do something like that in a covert way, which is the only way it could be done, because I would be putting something in there to eliminate the strength of the columns.
What?
That was not, I did give you a couple ways that could be done.
I heard hydraulics and cables.
Hydraulics, well, heating the joints, Ryan. Dr. Asane saw melting. He said like Salvador Dali paintings, it was like smooth like that at the joint ends of columns and beams.
Heating the beams by possibly setting the building on fire, that kind of thing?
I didn't quite hear that. Setting what? Setting the building on fire? It was already on fire.
I mean, we know the columns were heated. What's
Well,
the
they
problem?
weren't, no, the problem is there. Now we're going to get into another area. NIST doesn't have any evidence of high temperatures.
What do you propose, Don?
What I propose, the reason they didn't save the steel, most of it, they only saved less than half a
We're getting
percent.
off track because you're taking us there.
Well, we're talking about this whole issue, Ryan.
Tell me what you
I
think.
mean, we don't have an agenda here exactly.
Well, we
I
do
think
want to
in
talk
a-
about the physics, but on the other hand, if you're talking about explosives and we leave demolition professionals out of the equation
No,
entirely...
I wouldn't leave them out. I want to hear details from them. More than this, that's ridiculous. I don't want to hear just that's
Well,
ridiculous.
Stacey Loazo has commented at length on this.
What, that it would take a lot of people? That's not a good argument for it.
She's argued
I
that
think it's a terrible argument.
She's argued that the logistics would be daunting to the point of impossibility.
She has to show that in detail, and I don't see that level of detail coming
Again,
from her or other
you're
people.
saying a level of detail. People who work in the industry are saying, here's how we do our job, and here's why it wouldn't be possible to do it in this instance.
Well, I'm just hearing you can't. That's all I'm hearing. I don't hear any detail.
Why aren't you curious to talk to them?
I would like to talk to them. I would like to talk
have
to them,
to-
but I think, and I haven't had the opportunity to talk to some of these people. I would like to talk to them.
Ryan, you getting back to physics, to science, one of the most recent canards floating around the conspiracy universe is this notion of a substance called superthermite or nanothermite. Tell us about this, and can it do the magical things that its proponents allege?
Well, this is part of the reason I keep asking Tony, what do you think happened? It isn't entirely clear what the truth movement believes the nanothermite did. It isn't even clear that they know whether or not they've decided it's an explosive. Recently, Dr. Jones and Niels Harrit have backed away from that idea. They've said that they believe the nanothermite was only an ignition system for conventional explosives, which then raises the question, why? We've been setting off explosives for hundreds of years. Why would you use this rare, easily traceable substance that no one has ever seen before? Why wouldn't you use normal stuff? But if you go back to the letter that Tony signed, which was feedback to NIST on the World Trade Center 7 report, in that letter they claim that nanothermite is not being used as an explosive. They claim it's merely a heating agent. So until I understand better what the truth movement thinks it can do and what they think it was doing there, I really can't comment.
Well, you can't, you know, in a criminal investigation, if you find something that shouldn't be there, that doesn't discount it.
Well, first of all,
You have to investigate why it was there. It's certainly something that shouldn't be in the dust, nanothermite.
But they didn't find nanothermite.
They said they have said in their paper that they found nanothermite. And a lot of people like Ryan are saying it's paint. And I looked at this. I understand, you know, could be people be tricked into looking at that. However, there's several things that I can't discount that easily, and that there's elemental aluminum in these red gray chips that they found.
From aluminum cladding?
Actually,
No, it's elemental nanometer size, very small. That's a highly...
No. The pieces they found, first of all, they didn't do a test to show that it was aluminum and not aluminum oxide. They can't do that. Second of all, the chips they're talking about are micron size, not nanometer size.
No, they said not. In the paper, they say nanometer sized, Ryan. I don't know where
I can read it, Tony. You're wrong.
Well, I have read it. How could I mistake micron size from nanometer size?
Now, and before we even get into that, before I even bother evaluating this, I'd like to know, why was it there? Why are you guys interested in nanothermite in the first place? What do you think it did?
No, I want to know why something that is basically an energetic compound was in the dust of the World Trade Center. First, how it was used, that's not the way an investigation would work, Ryan.
Who's replicated this result?
There's somebody from the Boston area and somebody from France that I understand have replicated.
Talking about Dr. Henri Cognier?
Well, we have to wind up. We have to wind up this segment. We're going to start from this point in the third segment. I will leave you with one thought. If Stephen Jones and his accomplices wanted to prove their case, they would simply submit their samples to an independent lab for testing. Now, we all know that they will never, ever do this.
The U.S. government has an abundance of samples, from what I understand.
But Jones will never submit his samples for testing.
He doesn't have a lot of samples.
Tony, we're out of time,
Okay.
Unfortunately. We thank both Ryan Mackey and Tony SZAMBOTI for their informative and stimulating discussion. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time for the third installment of this great debate. I'm Ronald Wick. Good night.